Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Agents at Work. I'm Jordi, and today we have the pleasure to be with Sully Omar from Otto. Hi, Sully.
Hey Jordi, how's it going? Excited to be here today.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me too because this is for real. Like whenever someone tells me like I want to learn more about AI agents, who should I follow on Twitter? I was or X.com now. I am like, okay, go to Sully Omar and just like anything that he posts is signal. So I was really excited when I heard that you said yes to the podcast.
Thank you. No, I'm excited to be here. And I think for myself, I've been building agents for the last 2 years. And I just like to talk about like all of the sort of the pitfalls and the things, the downsides. Because I think nowadays with agents becoming more popular, a lot of people have a lot of things to say. But then when you talk to them and you ask them kind of like more specific questions, they start to not understand. So I'm always, talking about what I learned in my day to day. So I feel like a lot of people do find value in that.
Yeah, something that I see a big difference between you and many other people is that you're not just like exposing random opinions of, I think that this is how it's going to be, but you spend a lot of time tinkering. And this seems to be like the way for learning. So in the same way that models do their best when they have the right information in the prompt, you seem to be able to get that to be able to do the good calls by just tinkering with the models.
I think a lot of people need to tinker because it's such like a new space, and I think that the space changes so quickly that it's really hard to give your opinion if you don't try it. Whether it's a new model, whether it's like a new functionality. So I think it's pretty important to sit down and actually have some experience. And you're right, a lot of people will see something and they'll give their opinion and like they haven't even tried it. I always try to sit down and like play with it. If it's something big, I'll play with it for the day and then give my opinion. Or if it's something that's like not as big, I'll spend as much time as I can. And luckily, we're fortunate enough that we're building in the space, so I have like experience of like trying to build a product and push it out, and then I just kind of go through like what are the main things that I learned and all of the things.
Yeah, and for everyone who doesn't know about you yet, like you also are really good at explaining things. Like you have like a YouTube channel that you can share here because it's like really good content. So
Yeah,
how
no,
can they find you?
yeah. So I have a YouTube channel that I post. I not as much as I wish I could. So when I have time, and it's generally just me talking through the topics, whether it's reg, whether it's agents, new models. So you can just find me. That's my handle, Sully O, on YouTube. I haven't posted a video in a while, but whenever something new comes out, I try to like talk through and give my opinions and kind of go over all the pros and cons of whatever is new in AI, which is pretty often considering how quick things move here.
Yeah, and many people that do videos and things like that, there is no educational content there. They just say like, like this is a new thing, it's good. And you're like, okay, like this is no context at all.
Yeah,
Or it's better. And you're like, well, no. But in many of your videos, even if they are like 1 or 2 months old, that's quite a lot in AI time. There is value in there. So, if people want to rewatch old ones, I would say like, you are not just saying like, OpenAI just released O1. It's so cool. It feels different. You're like, okay, so
how tangible is that? Yeah, and that's what I try to do and that's why I only try to make videos when I really do feel like I have something important that I can kind of give out as a like I don't want to be a hype man. I want to be a substance man and trying to give people the real substance so they can make an informed decision whether they want to do it themselves or they want to do it in their business.
Excellent. And for bringing a bit more of context to the conversation, you said that you started about 2 years ago. Before those 2 years, what were you doing?
Yeah, I mean, so some context, I think, but before that, I was just like a regular, I'm not an AI researcher or scientist. I just had a regular job, just being an engineer. And then I started probably like 3 years, or, 2022, I started just getting interested right around the time like Dolly came out. And then before I'd been kind of messing with the GPT API. It wasn't as well known. So I just was playing around with things just in my spare time, hacking things together, trying to how does this thing work? Oh, this thing is really cool. And then obviously ChatGPT came out, and that one I was like, wow. So then I actually like tried to build a couple more products, tried to launch a couple of different things using Stable Diffusion. So still not so much into LLMs. And then fast forward to 2 years ago, which was when Auto GPT came out. That's actually when I like decided to again tinker. There was like a repo, I downloaded it, and then I actually started to tweet about it on X. And it got I went viral. That was actually the first time I ever went viral was when I was tweeting on X, and then people were like, "Oh, what's this agent thing?" And I remember like I posted one day, I had like 500 followers, and that like one post I said like Auto GPT is pretty crazy or something, and it got like 100 likes. And, before that, I got like at most like one, right? I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, okay, I got to spend the weekend. So I downloaded it, spent the weekend, and I ran it. And, back then, everyone thought it was crazy. Like, oh, wow, it can do all this stuff. And I posted about it. And then I got like, I think my next post got like, I want to say like 1,000 likes or something. And then the one after that went viral, like got like 4 million views. And that's actually, that's actually how sort of I got into all of this. It was just through like this one viral moment with Otto GPT that came out 2 years ago. And then, yeah.
Okay, so I will try to do the same, and I encourage other people in Twitter. So we just write Otto, it's amazing, or Otto GPT, it's amazing, and then we just see our likes going up.
Yeah.
Let's see after recording this how my tweet does.
I think nowadays it's a little bit harder because everyone is just, not as impressed with AI agents. But at the time, it was the first Auto GPT agent that everyone was just so like, they couldn't believe it.
Okay, so this was like a really like kind of proto agent, no? Like what pieces did you put together that made it an agent?
Well, back then it was just, it's, the same thing that you could kind of consider an agent today. But back then it was like you put GPT-4, the first version of GPT-4, you put it in a loop. It was a slightly different one. There was no tools, so it had no tools. It was just, hey, make a plan, and then it would iterate until it did finish the steps in the plan, and if it thought it would have more steps, it would generate more steps and continue. So that was like the first version of like GPT, Auto GPT, where it would just kind of run in a loop until it thought it was done. So that's how it started. And that was 2 years. So we've come quite a bit since then, but that was the first iteration of like an auto agent or whatever you want to call it.
Okay, and a question that I always like to do to all the guests is like, in this context, was an AI agent for you? So would it be like just this loop thing? Like, do you think that this is enough, or what is an AI agent for you?
I think it's a lot simpler than what most people think it is. I think an agent is some LLM, right? Whatever model you want. It's some tools. So access to some tools, whether that's the web, whether that's internal data, whether that's taking actions on your behalf, maybe you want it to, do specific things, and then running that in a loop. I think that's the simplest definition I have of an agent. And you can get to all the granular, like, I think they have like agent swarms and there's all these different wording, but I think the simplest form factor is that, and it just sort of thinks on its own, tries to, you give it an objective, you say, hey, I want you to do this thing, and it just kind of by itself makes some API calls and then, reasons over that. And that's kind of what I like to think of an agent as.
Yeah, I think that here one of the key things is this idea that the agent has to be the one doing the plan itself. So you see as a loop, but every step is not like predetermined. Because until now, like almost every program, it's a loop. But it's this idea of like the steps, the agent itself is the one like deciding.
Yeah, the main idea is just like it's just able to think on its own and take actions and just get to the end goal. That's kind of, again, what I think. And whatever tools you give it. And it kind of has like that decision tree of, did I do what the user asked me? Yes or no? And if it needs more information, and I think how well it does is dictated by what model, which models you use. So, 2 years ago, it wasn't very good. Nowadays, with reasoning models, it's a lot better. And then you can look in, the next 18 to 12 months as models get better. The agents actually will get simpler. And this is, I think, a common misconception is people think, well, I need to add more code and complexity. I actually think the agent will get simpler because the model will be smarter. It'll know what to do better. And I think moving forward, that's kind of where I see the stepping stones for agents.
For me, something that is really good is for people who are building them when they give this kind of signal. And you're the second person, because here, David from Omni, he actually came with the same conclusion. He said like, well, at the beginning, I had a research agent and I have to do a lot of scaffolding. And then the better the model, the more code can I remove, and the more I just leave the loop. And you can actually see how this is happening. Like people at the beginning was like, agents, there is any framework for agents here? Like for the web, I use frameworks. Is there anything for agents? Then they get LangChain or Crew AI or whatever of this. And then they see that there's a lot of scaffolding. And it's like, okay, so this is an agent. And in reality, it's like, no, you can every time like remove more and more things and show just that loop.
Exactly. And yeah, no, I know David. He's a great guy. He was the other guy who launched agents around when I did. So I consider him to be like one of the OG builder agent guys. So he has a lot of great ideas, and I agree with him completely. I think the frameworks nowadays, like, they're just there to sort of give you some like, some observability, which that can kind of be solved on its own. But yeah, like as the model gets better, you need less scaffolding, less guardrails, and you can just let the model do the thing. And there's different optimizations you can make later down the line when it comes to like, hey, like I don't want to pay so much, right? Like I think I don't want to pay if I have a task for an agent to do that costs me $40 and I have to pay someone, I could pay someone $20. Probably doesn't make sense to have the agent do it. So there are some minor optimizations that you can make, but I agree with that completely, that you can just start axing code as much as you can and just put it in a loop.
Yeah, David is great. The sentence that I always say that comes from him is this idea of don't bet against the models. Because as you say, like there's some optimization, but reality is that models keep getting better. Like
And
we don't have
cheaper.
to optimize that, and cheaper. Yeah, like it's always the three things, no? It's like better, cheaper, and faster is what I have been seeing. Unless it's in the direction of thinking, that right now it's like, okay, we are able to make them smarter with more thinking, but every time the thinking, it gets reduced. Like they are able to find the right shortcuts.
Yeah, and I think the thinking one as well, what you'll start to see, my prediction in the next, again, it's like you'll start to see, I think someone quoted, I forgot who it was, mentioned this as like they're basically like tool formers. So like what you'll start to see is they'll have like, RL, and they'll train the models to think and use tools in its thinking chain. So what you'll see is now the models, will think and it'll say, hey, I'm thinking. And eventually what they'll do is they'll probably have models that will think, and they'll also use tools in their thinking process, so that you kind of see this as well. Like you're going to kind of see this from like the big players, but you'll notice that more and more. And again, like to what David said, is don't bet against the models, and the models are going to get smarter. And I think especially now, the companies are looking more at the platform, at the app layer. So they'll start to have that experience of like, they'll start to, learn and understand how people are using their products. So I'm on board with that. And I think that like the models are just going to get so much better. So don't want to limit yourself today, because in 8 months, that might come back and bite you.
Yeah. Like that's going to happen for sure. And you can see, as you said, like the big labs pointing in that direction. And actually, there are some ecosystems that are developing in the way that allows this. So for example, MCP, it's this idea of write your tool once, expose it anywhere that it's MCP compatible. And I think that we will see like this more and more. Have you played with MCP?
I have. I'm still not fully sold on MCP. I think it has its use cases, but from my perspective, I think the main sort of opinion I have is I don't really understand why MCP is overly stateful for various use cases. I think it sort of defeats the purpose. Like, I think MCP makes sense if you're using it for something internal, where you're okay with managing the state. But that's kind of my opinion. I know, like, you have all these MCP servers, but I think it's really not that different to me personally. And I know there's nuance to like having your own tool with an API. That's kind of what I think of MCP. It's just, it's just stateful and you can expose it. So I'm not fully convinced. I like the direction that it's going, but I don't know if the final rendition, in my opinion, would be MCP. It's sort of, I think it needs a couple more iterations, but I definitely do think that style of, paradigm will become more popular, where it's, it's basically like, it's a service. It's going to be an agent service. And I can say, hey, I have all these different things and I can sell it to you for, your agent can use this server for, I don't know, whatever, 10 cents per request or something. Some rendition of that will happen. Maybe it is MCP. I'm not convinced, but I definitely think that is going to be kind of becoming more prevalent and common.
It's funny that you say that, because actually, like, I have a company that it's on payments, and the idea it's on AI payments. So we have this thing that it's the L402 protocol, that it's payment flow over HTTP. And the idea is like, well, now AI agents are not going to be using the browser. They will be able to pay everywhere. For a lot of time, it was really hard to people to understand why an AI should pay, because they were like, well, but I am in the driver's seat most of the time. So what's the problem? I'm already in the browser. I can just put my credit card there. Then with MCP, it was the first time that people understood why that happened. For me, it was surprising, because it was really, really clear. It was like, well, people are not going to consume your service from the browser. Like, your service is be exposed in a way that can be consumed from everywhere. You don't know what the client is. One is going to be MCP, another one is going to be a Python script, and soon it will be your fridge that, you say, like, I need to purchase this. Intelligence is getting everywhere. And MCP was actually what made it click to people. And I think that it's exactly in the direction that you say, that it's like, it's not as much about the solution itself, but the problem that it solved. It allowed people to see like, oh, okay, wait a second. Like, it's going to be consumed from everywhere. So I need to package it in a way. And they are one of the first ones. The other one is LLMs.txt, that I also like it. And it's actually, people seem to misunderstood it, but it was like the same idea of the LLM may not be consuming your app from the browser. So expose it in a way that they can understand, and then it looks like a normal markdown or text. But what it's doing is like breaking this link of there is not going to be a render thing. Maybe it cannot execute JavaScript. Maybe it doesn't have, like the full thing of local storage, etc., that the browser provides. So what is the minimum thing that you need to expose if you assume that on the other side there's going to be some kind of intelligence consuming this?
Yeah, I think we're going to see more of that. I think those are the types of things that are always on the tail end, right? Like the best frameworks come out many years after a language is mature. And I think the best solutions to how agents interact with different data and what, like, I feel like we haven't figured it out. And I think LLMs.txt is a good one. It just makes it easier. I don't need to, if I want to, crawl your thing or index your site so that the model can query it, I don't need to like go through all of your pages and crawl. And I don't actually need to have my, what's it called, agent like get your bandwidth all the way through the roof, right? I know that's pretty common nowadays, is like people's bandwidth going, because like all of the different like models and agents, and they're all like pinging their site, and it's just causing them. So I think agent first paradigms are going to become more prevalent as we sort of get models smarter, right? Like you're going to just see them like because we're basically not there yet. Like it's the unit economics for agents are not there where you can spin up a million agents. Like you cannot do that today. That's going to cost you more than hiring a team of people. But eventually, and I don't know how long, the models are going to be smart, which is the first step, and then they need to be cheap, and then that's the second step, and then they need to be 10 times cheaper than that, and then we'll get to the point where we'll have a million agents. And the way that I actually like to think about this, someone mentioned this to me, is like what an agent actually is doing, if you think about it, or a swarm of agents, is like it's compressing what a person has to do from a month to a day. So if you think about that for a second, what does a person do in their job? Well, they click on a website, they hit some APIs, maybe they know what an API is, maybe they're using some product that transfers data, then they close. So they have all of these network requests that happen, they have all of this bandwidth, all of that, and then the company that's serving them, right, on their infrastructure for a human, right? Maybe they serve their backend on GCP or AWS, and they sort of have this like trend of like how much people are using it. That's how humans use it. But if you look at how an agent consumes it, it's very different. It's, an agent is going to be doing the actions that a human does in 1 month in 1 day. But the underlying networking, servers, all of that, like that doesn't change. Like that still has to happen. And I think that's like an interesting paradigm shift of like traditional software usage, and that one still hasn't been solved yet. I know Cloudflare are doing like some pretty interesting things, but I think that's also like another one of those things that like once the ecosystem matures, you'll start to see more people talking about. But it's still very interesting to see like how all of this will kind of play out.
Yeah, and it's really hard to think with second order effects, because here, like most of the people, I see them not talking about it at all. Then I see people saying, like, wow, like the client is going to be an agent. It's going to be so smart. It's going to be able to do so much. But then there is also, well, why only the client? I mean, maybe the server also can get smarter. So why do I even need to expose APIs when I can't communicate in natural language how I do with my accountant? And, like I tell my accountant what I want. He just asks me for some information, but it doesn't have to be in a JSON. I just like give him the information, and then he knows how to operate the tools that he has. So I think that we're going to see like also more and more in this direction of saying like, well, the server, it's actually just telling you like, hi, it's not like I am a GitHub and I tell you all the tools.
Yeah.
A GitHub agent, just tell me what you want. Like I know how to do the tools.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where you run into the sort of multi-agent paradigm, which again is not, I think it's a lot less complicated than what one person might think. Is like if you assume the average agent is what I said before, right, and the number of tools, let's say there's a limit. Maybe an agent is only good up to 10 tools. And I think what you're going to have is you're going to have your GitHub, the user, you are going to interface with the basic GitHub, let's call it, client agent, right? He knows all of the tools. He knows maybe all of the sub agents that work in GitHub. And then you ask it, hey, da da da. And then what it's going to do is going to say, okay, first I need to read all the code and index it. So maybe there's an agent that's responsible for fetching and sub agent. Maybe another one's like, hey, I need to check if this API service works and whatnot. So I think we're starting to see the early innings of that, but I do think that's also another way of how agents will scale, and how, like you said, to your point, where like you're just going to talk to a single one, you tell it what you want, and then it's going to go figure out, okay, I'm going to do accounting. I'm probably going to need to grab like a data analyst, right? To like look through all of your transactions for your CSV. And then I need to look at maybe a web browsing agent because I need to click through, some sites, as you know, probably are really bad and they don't have any APIs. So I definitely think that that's going to kind of be the next, I think, step where we'll see agents become more useful.
And if you focus, you can start seeing it. So, for example, when OpenAI now released the Agents API, that they are going in this direction because they say like, well, there's going to be a lot of state that we as a platform want to start to take care of, because then we can do more like this idea. It's not just chat competition, but you can give me the tools and I can iterate them myself without having to return to the client every time and things like that. So I think that it's starting to happen, but of course it takes a while for the world to understand.
Yeah, and I also think just the models need to be better. I think
Yeah.
the model and then the tooling around it needs to be better. We're still a couple of iterations, and I don't know how long it's going to take. Like, people say, oh, we've hit a wall with reasoning. They're still going up, but like, there's like, you saw the most recent launch for some companies where the model's like, not doing as well as they expected it to do. So it's hard to really know exactly when it's going to play out. But like, I'm honestly like, I have a pretty good gauge of when a model comes out. I can like, it's pretty easy nowadays to tell based on like what people say on X. And like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, this new model's AGI. And I think that's such like a naive way of looking at it. But I feel like, and if you use it, and probably I'm sure you can, is like, you can tell when the model's like a step function. So like, in my mind, I kind of have like a good, vibe of like when the new model comes out and you're like, wow, like this can do, so much more than the previous iteration. And I think we saw that with the new reasoning models. That was like a big step function and all of them being so smart. And I think whatever the next generation is, that'll probably also be like what we'll think, okay, wow, like this can unlock, it's like a skill tree. You can unlock the next layer of abilities when you level up.
Something that I really like from your takes is that you have two things that make you like really good at this. The first one is that you have a framework or ontology for categorizing the models. And then the second one is that because you have that framework, you know how to test them. So you say like, I am able to say the right questions. So I get information to put one model in one of these categories. And then, like everything else falls. Like everyone's like, wow, this is such a good take. And you're like, yeah, because I do it this way. And this from the outside, like if you focus, like you can see. So what is your framework? So how would you categorize right now?
So that was actually, I made a video about this a while ago, and I called it the 3-tiered system. So I call it a 3-tier system, and so basically what you have is 3 categories or tiers. So you have the workhorse tier. So this is your tier 1. These are your very cheap, very affordable, not so smart models, and they're not reasoning, they're not thinking models. So, think of the cheapest model, but that's also really good. That's your tier 1. So, maybe the small models, the Gemini Flash, the whatever. That's tier 1. Then you have your second tier of models, which are a step up from these, the cheap models, and they're the like non-thinking or very little thinking, but very smart models. So, Claude, the Claude 3.7, I would still consider that like it's not really full thinking. The ones that are still pretty quick to act and respond. So, but they're a little bit more expensive, but they're not like super, super expensive, but they're still, that's like the middle tier. And then you have your third tier, which are the heavy reasoning models. So, the very, and there's actually not that many of these heavy reasoning models that are out. I think O1 Pro is probably the one there. And you'll see a lot of other companies come out with their, very heavy reasoning. And the way I like to think about it is like, I want to give all of my grunt work to the cheap models, because if I'm a bit like, I don't want to pay, why should I pay a premium if it's just extracting the number of names that happen in some, 50-page PDF, right? Why should I pay $100 when I can pay 10 cents? And then you have your sort of like in between middle layer models, which are a mixture of like, okay, they're not too expensive, but they're also pretty smart. And I'm going to use that for like the majority of my tasks. And then you have your heavy reasoning models. And these are the ones that I'm going to be like, okay, like I'm keeping you for like the most difficult tasks because it's going to charge me a lot of money, right? I'm going to leave it for you. And that's kind of how I like to think about the 3-tiered model. And then I'll constantly try to categorize, okay, what is where, what model goes where. And that's kind of how it gives me a good signal to like determine where to use a model, how to use it, when to use it. And that's just something that I've been doing for the last little bit. But I think the lines are kind of between the second and third tier. It's kind of blurring a little bit. I'm slowly actually taking models out of that, putting it into the second tier. and sort of reserving that last tier for the really, really expensive, like long running models.
And would you say like second and third tier like are in the same category as, like if the third tier was as cheap as the second one, could you always use something from the third tier, or they are like for different use cases?
So I think different use cases, but I think that as the price comes down, I slowly move it into that second tier. The only sort of trade-off is latency. So for example, if I'm going to build a customer support agent, right? There's a lot of these. I'm probably not going to use a model that takes 20 minutes to think to do the task. Like that, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter how cheap it is, how smart. Like a user talking to my customer support agent is not going to wait 20 minutes per response, right? That just doesn't make sense. So that's why I would use it in the second tier. So it's this balance of like intelligence, pricing, time to response, and things like that. So it's just like a mixture of all of these sort of variables that I like to look at, and that's kind of how I move it between the second and third tier.
And when a new model comes out, how do you test it to put it in one place or another? What kind of, like questions or prompts or tests do you run there?
There's a lot of ways you can, the answer most people will give you, well, I run it through my evals, which is okay, sure, great. You run it through your internal evals. That's fair. There's a couple of really good signal points. One is becoming very obvious to me is just looking on X, and you would think it's a meme. It's like, oh, what? But I'll start to see, like, people will say, like, I use it for this, it's not that good at this. And you can start to form an opinion based off of, the whole community giving their opinions and thoughts. So that's another way. I'll say, okay, look, a model comes out and every single post I see says it's bad. I'm probably going to be like, you know what? Is it even worth my time to use this model? Right? So that's another way. And then the other one is like we use it internally with our own product and just see how it is. I have a couple of tests that I run. Obviously, I'm a developer, so I like to code. I'll say, okay, how good is it at coding? How well can it do there? I have there's multimodal, right? Is it multimodal? What are some things I can try with it? So there's a whole slew of things that you can kind of run. And I always say to everyone that like nowadays with the models that are actually pretty good, you don't need that much to know if it's the right model for you. First, look on X. Let's just see. Okay. Wait a week. Also, caveat this. Wait a week. If you do it within the day, everyone says, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. Within a week, you'll get the true opinion of what everyone says. And then in that week, you have the chance to take that model and try it on your own. Use it for yourself, whether that's you're building a chatbot, run it through your own internal things. And if it's, then use that as like a benchmark and gauge for whether or not you kind of want to use it for your, whether it's within your company, whether you're using it for your day-to-day. And that's how I do it, really, is just sit down, see what people are saying, run some tests on it, run some evals, use it myself. So.
And you said that for sure, like you use them for development and things like that, but you also said that you leverage them in your product. How are they used in your product? Like what's their position there?
Yeah, I mean, we use a lot of models in our product for like various use cases. And from the perspective of a business, you're trying to like juggle price to like, you gotta sell it and then the price is here. I look at all of the different angles, and the way that maybe I use it in my business differs because price matters. I can't just say, hey guys, you guys all get, GPT whatever at the price of nothing. It's not going to work. So there's different variables. So when we're looking at it from the perspective of the business, does it have good rate limits? We'll run it through, and one of the things I actually like to do that I've been trying is it's called vibe testing, because again, the best way to tell if a model is good or not is to like sort of just have your customers use it. So we'll do these things. New model will come out, and for like 2 days, I'll push it out and sort of just see. And then if a bunch of customers start to complain, I'm like, oh, okay, it's a bad model, right? So I'll roll it back. I mean, it's a very, harmless way. Maybe, it's a day or two, people don't like it. So that's like how we check in our business. And then obviously the other ones are like, yeah, is it cheap? Is it performing well? The boring stuff. But that's generally how I like to test it for our business. And then, for example, for my personal is different. I have different use cases. I use, Cursor, whatever. So I don't care too much how much it costs. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to use the best model. So
yeah, like when you are like, it's not like an investment. Like it makes you like faster. It's good. And even what you said about, well, people complain for a couple of days. It's not even like harmful. It's actually like something good, because the reality is that for every time that they complain and you have to do one step back, taking new things allows you to do 10 steps ahead. So, by the time that you went take one back, you have already like improved so much that, like it's the right strategy there.
Yeah, it's just faster. I think some people just will sit on it and, you gotta just put it out, see how it goes, and as long as nothing catastrophic happens.
Yeah. And in the world of AI, like speed is one of the few mottos that are still there. Like, like the idea of executing fast.
Yeah, you have to move really fast. I do think that iteration cycle has actually come down a little bit, which is nice. So what I mean by that is in the last 2 months, outside of the coding models getting better, nothing has actually changed too much on the application layer. Like I'm trying to think, in the last 2 months, nothing drastic has changed on the application layer that I was like, oh my God, like we're gonna go back and just revamp everything, right? Nothing actually has changed that drastically, other than the models that do coding have gotten better. Like that was like I think the biggest thing, and that might just be like a byproduct of like the X niche is overly focused on coding, and there's not a lot of industries that care so much about AI other than developers. But that's sort of what I've been kind of viewing it as.
Also, this show how far we have come, because I would say like in the last month, one of the biggest thing happened that was like image generation, but it's not something that, in this product you
exactly.
fight with. But, like they just drop it on one Wednesday. And by next week, we already say like, well, it has been like so long since there's like new weeks.
Yeah, actually, you're right. I forgot about that. It's funny that you mentioned the image generation one that came out, and you're right. I remember when it came out, I was telling people try it, and I literally just forgot about it. So like, it's actually
like,
a pretty funny point. Yeah.
There is a lot going on. And inside your product, like what does the LLM do? Like what kind of product do you have?
Yeah, so I mean, our product Otto is essentially we put agents in a spreadsheet, and what we did was we basically made workflows inside of a spreadsheet, and this is a technical explanation, is that we basically take a bunch of unstructured data and then put it into this like spreadsheet format, which is nicely outputted, and it lends itself well to the more non-technical users. Because if you're an engineer and you know databases and you're like JSON and you're like, wow, this stuff makes sense. The average person doesn't know that. And so what we tried to do is we tried to take this like cell level approach for agents and say like, hey, look, each cell is its own agent. It's going to go and do some task. The columns can sort of wait for another column to finish. It can do another task. And then that's all nicely outputted in a table. So that's sort of our product. We took a different approach. As opposed to having a chat, we said, hey, look, let's just put these things in a spreadsheet because most people are pretty familiar with the spreadsheet and it has all of the same functionalities and UXs. So we fundamentally, what we did, we just changed the way that you would interact with an agent. Instead of you chatting with it, which you still can, where the agent will like kind of like operate the table for you, you're now like getting it to run in a very different way, right? Instead of like a chatbot. So that's our product that we've been building out.
Yeah, and I think that because it's happening so fast and engineers are at the forefront of it, they focus a lot on things like cursor. And then now people are saying like, wow, this is going to disrupt SaaS so fast, like so badly, it's going to be crazy. But in reality, what already disrupted SaaS, like the biggest SaaS in the world is Excel. Excel, it's something that, like full companies are running on that software.
Yes, exactly.
Crazy. And many engineers, they just like disestimate it because it's like, well, what is this? But if you go to any Forbes 500, it is like billions of dollars, as Donald Trump would say, like billions and billions and billions that are just on a spreadsheet. So just like revolutionizing that, I think that it's going to be one of the biggest like Jevons paradox ever. Like it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, you go ask any accountant, ask any finance team. Any majority of the world runs in a spreadsheet. And I think that it's definitely an underserved area because like you said, hey, developers look at this and they kind of look down at a spreadsheet like, oh, what's this? You don't know how to use a Postgres database? Come on. Versus, the average accounting team or finance or whatever, like they're in that spreadsheet, many hours in the day.
By the way, and that applies to agents too. Like now many people are going to say like, wow, I want to do a database for agents. But if you do like, I do a spreadsheet for agents, like that's their tool.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised, like, like, wow, the agent usually like, it always chooses the same tool. That's his hammer.
Yeah.
Like many developers now would be laughing at this probably when they are listening to it, but I'm not even joking. Like I think that it's going to be huge.
Yeah, I think it's still like there's still a little bit of like you kind of gotta battle the finance guys to get them off Excel, which is another whole other business side of things. Is can you get them to swap? But I think the actual underlying like can this be more productive and like do actual can it generate GDP? I think the answer is yes. It's just a matter of like can you get people to switch over Excel because it's just so ingrained in everyone's head.
And right now, when the models get better, it's easy for you to know what to focus on. Like you say, like, well, this is the core value proposition, and like just improving this, we are getting like 50-fold for every dollar that we invest. We're making 50 because it's so optimized. Or during this path, you actually need to leave things out of the table because you're like, wow, this is so powerful that we can do any of these things and all of them bring money, but we need to focus in the one that it's such a nice problem to have, in the one that brings us the most of the money. Like the one that has the most impact.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge for every company because, like you said, there's so many things that you could potentially solve. Finding the right one is just as hard as solving the problem itself. Because, like I said, right, you could solve a problem where you're like, wow, this is, if I solve this, it's going to make me billions of dollars. And then you build the solution, it's using agents, and the agents are like, oh my God, it's working. But then the main issue is that, like, the company that you're wanting to, onboard, they're like, we don't like AI. It's like, well, so that I don't have a direct answer for you yet. But whenever a new model comes out, I constantly assess what could we not do before, and what can we do now, and what is the dollar delta, right? So if the dollar delta is like, if the thing that I could do in the future is millions of dollars, okay, maybe we'll kind of shift the course that way. But if it's like the delta is $1, well, no, we're going to stay the course. So that's kind of what I always do when a new model comes out. I try to have that mental model and assess accordingly.
Yeah, and the reality is that there is so many good people working on base models right now. And so many great companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, XAI, now Google. And I see a lot of people that just like tweeting bad stuff, like, oh, Google missed out, they are going away. Or now with Google, no, because it's back, no?
Yeah, they're so back.
What drives engagement is saying these things, like, for example, Apple, like they don't have Siri, how can it be display, like they are going to miss out, and you're like, guys, like it's okay, like and they're going to do okay. One day they're going to be back, and like
yeah, they'll figure it out. But it is, that one's pretty interesting to see. I'm very curious why, because like Siri is like the perfect on ramp for the average person. Like, I think even you and I could sit down in a day and we could hack together a better Siri, right? I think anyone could be like, yeah, like, if I ask Siri to turn my battery settings to what's it called, low power mode, it should be able to do that, and it's not that hard to do that. So that one's an interesting one. I don't know what's going on because I feel like it would be valuable, but yeah.
Yeah, they only need to open a bit their APIs. Like if they allow me to plug into Apple Intelligence, like I can have commerce through there. Like people just saying like, hi, Taylor Swift is coming here. Like I would like to buy a ticket.
Yeah.
Just have it done.
I don't know why. I really don't know why that's not happening, because I think that will be the major like unlock for people, but I have no clue why.
Well, we'll have to wait a bit, but I would not like count them out yet, as many people say, like, well, they are done.
Yeah.
Okay, so I always like to close with a couple of questions. The first one would be like, what would you like to see in the next like 6 to 9 months?
I would like to see more varying products in different. I feel like and maybe it's just because of the social, but I think a lot of people are sort of all trying to solve similar problems, and they're not thinking around the box. Yeah, that's sort of what I would like to see, is people trying more challenging, interesting problems. I would like to see smarter models, obviously, who doesn't? Cheaper models, of course. I'd like to see better evals from big companies that tackle maybe like less of the, what I like to call like sort of like the benchmarks that you see today. Like I feel like those are just becoming meaningless. They're all saturated.
Yeah.
I want to see like, hey, okay, how good is this? I want an eval for how good this model is at understanding my Salesforce account, right? Like that's a pretty meaningful one not for me, but for other people. So those are kind of the main things I would like to see.
Yeah, a couple of points here is for the thinking out of the box. I think that right now the main thing, like the bottleneck with the current models even, it's creativity of people. Like we don't know how to apply them. It's like, well, just think, like try stuff, and like things like the connecting it to a spreadsheet. It's one of the things that you're like, there is a lot of value here. Like we need more people trying this stuff. And then the other one is, it's incredible how with the models, like right now you said like they are saturated. There's like really smart people working on models. And then out of the blue, they show some plot. And it starts at 90% because the difference is like 90.8% or 93%. And you're like, okay, guys, like, can you see that this is saturated?
Yeah.
Like we're fighting for it. We have to visualize it this way.
We need better. Yeah, I like the non-tangible ones, like, Claude Plays Pokemon or the Minecraft bench. I think we need more of those creative sort of benchmarks, and I think there just needs to be like a more measurable way to see like how useful is it becoming, other than we got 99.9 on GGPQ, LF, whatever, random benchmark there is.
And what about in the next 6, 9 months? What would you like stop seeing? Like something that people are doing today that you're like, okay, like just stop.
That's a good one. What would I like to stop seeing? I guess that kind of goes back to the first point of what I said. I wanted to see people like, I think a lot of people like, I want to see slightly less coding agents. I feel like I'm kind of sick of those. I want less of those in general. Honestly, that's pretty much it. There's not a lot. Like, there hasn't been anything that's been bothering me. For a while, it was MCP. That's all I saw. And I was like, please, like, I can't take it anymore. I just wanted to see less of that. But I think overall, none of the things that I'm seeing in the day-to-day have been, like, very frustrating. I think the community that the people that we see on X or wherever, I think they're all, like, willing to learn and adapt. I think no one's really tied to one specific idea. If someone says, hey, like maybe RAG isn't as useful or maybe RAG changes, like no one, everyone's like, yeah, okay, you know what, maybe you're right. So I think there's not that many things other than like, I don't want to see more coding agents. I've seen enough. Like there's enough. I don't want to see them anymore. I want people to try new things that are not those specific ones.
I think that for anyone listening this, like it's pretty clear that you're talking about in absolute, not in relative terms, not absolute. So we want like more people doing coding agents than ever, but that cannot be the only thing that we do. And then it happens the same with MCP. Like MCP is going to like grow a lot, but please, we should talk about other stuff too. And then for a while, it was impossible to find anyone that was not talking about MCP.
Yes, it just feels like there's a group of really smart people and they're all kind of working on the same problems. So it'd be nice to see people trying new and like maybe not so obvious ideas and pushing LLMs to like what they maybe couldn't do before. So that's kind of what I'd like to see.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Sully. Looking forward to, doing another one of these. It was a lot of fun for me. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. And it's always fun talking with anyone about agents. It's really exciting.
So I'm going to try something right now. What did I have to tweet? Otto is...
Yeah, awesome? The best is the greatest ever. No.
I will report back.
Okay,
thank you so much. Have a good one.